everybody. It is Dr. Sarah Inman. I'm here with Vince Jackson for another episode of our Workforce on Deck podcast. Say hello, Vince. How are you this morning?
Good morning. I am fantastic, even though it is freezing down here in Florida. I am excited to be here and glad to talk about retail a little bit.
It is indeed freezing. So for those of you in other areas of the country who are in -0, we are here close to the beach in the 40s and shivering with our long sleeves and the heat on. So thoughts and prayers for the Floridians having this terrible for us weather. But as Vince said, today we're actually going to focus a little bit on retail. So those of you who are avid listeners of the podcast know we spent a lot of time focusing on my background in healthcare in a previous episode, and we thought we'd turn the tables a little bit and have Vince be in the hot seat and start asking him some questions about his long career in retail. So I'm going to kick it off just with, tell us how you wound up in the retail space. Give us the background. Where did your path take you that you said, yep, retail's for me?
I'm not sure I ever said, "Yep, retail's from me." Okay, let's set that up first. But I mean, like every kid graduating college, right? You're like, okay, what do I do now? It just so happened, I graduated with a business management degree with a specialty in marketing and sales, which I still love doing to this day. But when I graduated, our family actually owned a pro golf discount store down in Tallahassee, Florida. And my brother's like, hey, come work with me. And they needed the help. Business was going well. I'm like, all right, I'll do it. I love my family, but working with them is a challenge. So after a little over a year after that, being there, which I did enjoy it. We were on the floor running, selling, doing everything. It was a great experience to really get to understand retail, right? Especially when it's your own business and learning how to sell and watching a couple of the other people in the store and just learning, the aspects of that and how to run a retail organization, how to market, how to draw people in. Got to apply some of that in real life. And after about a year, though, I decided to jump and landed with Philips Magnavox, part of Philips Consumer Electronics. And at the time, they owned a couple outlet stores and they were growing. That was back in the 90s, in the heyday of outlet stores. And got on as an assistant manager in one of the locations up in Georgia. Did really well there, moved up to manager, then moved out to Colorado, opened a store out there, and also became the marketing manager for the chain of about 12 stores. Again, put my marketing management degree in use and had a fantastic time. But little trivia, this was 95. At that time, Google Marketplace and Amazon, none of that existed, right? Okay. I put our stores on the internet. We were selling TVs and electronics online in 95.
You could have been Bezos.
Don't remind me, okay, please. But it's pretty hilarious that, you look back at it, you're going, wow, we were doing that and we were pretty innovative. And honestly, that's what I love anyway, right? That's me, vision, strategy. But I did that. After several years, I decided to move back to the Southeast. Ended up with Adidas. I ran a store in Georgia for just under a year, and then they moved me up to do ops in one of the corporate offices in South Carolina. So I did operations and retail, and that time we had about 20 stores in Adidas, and they had one person in IT, and they're like, Vince, you manage him. And I'm like, okay. And we were good friends anyway, so I started managing IT. And so I come from an operational / retail background, manage IT. We start expanding. We get into the inline sides, going in major cities, and we're growing like crazy. We're at 40, 50 stores. I end up moving out to the corporate office in Oregon, continue to do that. Just loving retail. We continue to be, even in Adidas, I was always driving us to be state of the art.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2001, we were rolling out workforce management. Kronos at the time was way behind everybody else. That was the day of WorkBrain and Blue Cube were the things.
Yeah.
Going way back, right? So this is how I got into workforce management, mm-hmm. especially around the retail side. We selected WorkBrain. We implemented WorkBrain, and from forecasting, scheduling to timekeeping, the whole 9 yards, integrated into our SAP HR. I was the executive sponsor on that. But that wasn't the only thing, in retail, we were always trying to innovate. We had implemented a full suite, back of house POS slash, ERP for retail. And we were driving innovation. I mean, we were doing things with marketing that no one else was done. And, we rolled out VoIP IP in about 2003, which nobody was doing. And, we did the cost analysis and, to roll out voice IP and put internet in all the stores. So I love doing innovation. I love retail. I love leveraging innovation to make retail more successful. Put the tools in place, put the processes in place, put the enablers in place to go drive your business and do what it is that you want to do, which is sell at the end of the day,
Right.
Sell efficiently and effectively. So that's kind of the long story of the journey of how I got here. And sorry for the long story, but when I decided to leave Adidas, this was a year after we had merged or acquired, I guess, Reebok at the time. We were up to 300-400 stores, somewhere up there. And I still was running retail systems and everything for the stores. And I decided that I wanted to change. And I got actually recruited into consulting around workforce management, especially on the business side, by the executive sponsor I worked with at WorkBrain. And that's how I got into this. I mean, so, fast forward 17 years now, I've been doing consulting, worked for a vendor, and I just love the retail sector and I love workforce management. So I love what it can do to help businesses.
It is so incredible how pretty much everybody I talk to, regardless of industry, they have such a unique story in terms of how they went from one space and then somehow got themselves entangled, if you will, in workforce management, right? You starting out as a retailer, missing your opportunity to, create the half.com of TV sales, turning yourself into Jeff Bezos 2.0.
Yep.
I'm going to harp on that for the rest of the time we work together that, Vince, if only. But it's
here's your box of salt before the wings. No problem. Yeah.
But it's, the twists and turns that brought so many of us to the workforce management space from our different industries. I feel like so much come back to people who have that innovative mindset, who are thinking outside the box within their respective industries and saying, what can I do differently? How can I, leverage different technologies and things that are going on? And then here we all are, we find ourselves, focused on workforce management. So with that, I had a whole bunch of questions that I was thinking about asking you, and that really just kind of got me into more around innovation. What are you seeing right now in the retail space around innovation, whether it's, different technology partners, it's, things happening in workforce management, not to lead the witness here, but I think about our friends over at Workerbee, right? The things that they're doing to help retailers. What are you seeing right now in the market that really has your attention?
Quite a few things, right? I mean, I think to answer that, let's probably almost step back to what are the challenges retailers are facing right now. Obviously, the days of the malls are done, right? Except for exception locations,
Sadly.
exception places.
Yep.
Stores are getting smaller, except for your mega big ones. It's like you either got big ones, or everybody's driving down to a smaller size to be more efficient.
Yeah.
Innovation on the distribution and delivery side has gone so far. I mean, look at Prime, right? Order it now and get it tomorrow, even the same day, possibly.
Yeah.
Retailers are catching up with that, right? Retailers are leveraging platforms such as Amazon and others to actually sell their product. It's you used to hear the word omni-channel. It's that doesn't do it justice anymore. It's you can sell your product everywhere, anyway. The challenges retailers are facing are cost of people and being able to get people right, dependable and flexibility and matching to the demand that there's. This has always been the problem, right? You always got that what's my demand and what's my staffing level, can I get to it, and then it's too short a period, can I cut the shift, and having enough part-timers and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of challenges that retailers face, but I think the biggest one is especially when you talk to your standard mid-sized retailer that sells a product that just they make or something like that. They're facing the issue of being relevant, of being able to maximize their return when they are hot, and then to stay current and to stay And there's only so much workforce management can do that. I think the biggest thing is, they have to be able to be fluid.
Hmm.
So uh, I know I'm kind of rambling here a little bit all over the place, but there's a lot of issues that are facing retail today. Um, so workforce management can help a lot with helping solve that problem from a staffing. But what they really have to tap into, and you hit it, was opportunities like what Workerbee does for technology companies.
Hmm.
Is you have to be able to almost go with I hate to use the Uber, but you almost have to be able to do Uber staffing,
Yeah.
which means people are going to work at multiple retailers in multiple locations just to be able to make enough money.
Mhm.
And they're going to be more part-time people that you can tap into if you do that, and you'll be able to flex to your demands and your customer needs better. Um,
I think that's so true. And it's one of the reasons that worker bee kind of popped in my head as we were talking, because I feel like, from somebody who does not come from the retail space, other than I did work at a Hallmark store once in my teenage years. So, you could say I'm a retail veteran. I did my time in the trenches. But you have to have that flexibility for the workforce. And I feel like, as somebody as obsessed with staffing and workforce management as I am, retail truly is leading the way in that regard, like, because they have to be the innovators in that space in order to fill their needs. It's different from a hospital who's staffing, nurses and physicians who have gone to school for years and years, for this particular career, and they're looking for this particular role. In retail, it's a ever shifting environment. There's different skill sets that are needed. They've got to flex to demand. So talk to me a little bit about that, because with me, it always goes to staffing. I can't help but go there.
Absolutely. So, when it comes to the staffing needs, you got to understand your demand, and to understand your demand, you got to understand what's driving that, whether it be number of customers and the customer service you want to offer, to how many transactions you're running, to how much stock are you turning in staffing, to the size and environment. There's so many elements that go into building the right schedule, and that's where it's critical. Is you have to understand your business, and
Mhm.
you have to understand the model you're trying to deliver. When I go in and talk to retailers, the first thing I do is, first thing I ask is, what's the desired customer experience you are trying to deliver?
Mhm. Oh, wow. That's I mean, when you say it, it makes sense, right? But to come out of the gate with that that's it, right?
It is it.
Yeah.
And half the time you get kind of this blank stare of, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
You know what? Nor if you don't know, your customer doesn't know.
Yeah. Figure it out.
You figure it out
Mhm.
and decide what it is, and then you're going to have to build everything around that to support that. And so to dive into that a little bit deeper, right? And you can look at the big box model, where a lot of them are less attentive,
Mhm.
right? It's self-serve.
Yep.
And then there's other big boxes that focus on having a little bit more staffing. They run around in certain color shirts, and they pretend, they make sure that they ask you questions and see if you need help on a regular basis. And there's others that drive it through innovation, to help solve it too. We'll circle back a little bit to the other elements of what make staffing a challenge, but you can also solve problems through innovation.
Mhm.
I'm a big do-it-yourselfer around, doing work, around my house and actually renovating other houses. And I have to say it, this is a call out a little bit for Home Depot, but I love the application they've developed and built.
Mhm.
I can go in and, one, buy online, pick up, have it ready to roll.
Yeah.
Secondly, I can make sure that, when I put a list together, I want to shop. When I go in the store, I can hit store mode and just walk it and pick up
Mhm.
things, go right to where it is. Honestly, I don't depend on their resources as much as I used to.
Mhm.
So, and to the point, there's a lot of ways that you can help try to solve problems, and but it really circles back to starting with, what is that customer experience that you're trying to deliver.
Mhm.
And from there, if you decide, hey, I want to be able to talk to every customer that walks in the door, then guess what? You're going to change your model. If it's, I just want to have someone available if they want to get help, then you got to understand, what is that customer ratio that allows you in a store at a time, right? To understand, hey, I got one person for every 10 people. That should be enough. You're going to have to play around with it to figure out what that model is. Or you could be completely self serve, right?
And it's so incredible that you mentioned that, because my experience going to a Home Depot is exactly the opposite of yours. I need help. I need, like, Joe with his tool belt, who's worked at Home Depot for 10 years, who's done every home improvement project you can think of, that I can go up to him and say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. I'm trying to replace this light outside. Help. I need everything. My dad is going to be the exact opposite. He's Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec. Like, I don't need help. I know more than you. But to be able to have such a large organization flex to the customer expectations and demands of what Sarah needs when she walks in Home Depot, which is she can just kick rocks and cry because I have no idea what I'm looking for, versus Vince going into Home Depot saying, I got my app. I know exactly which aisles I need to go to. I can get in and out in 10 minutes. That's pretty incredible when you consider, I mean, I live in Orlando. There feels like there's a Home Depot on every corner. So how, as somebody who not only has worked in this space, but also frankly is a business strategist in the retail industry, how do you get to a point like that where you can be a Home Depot?
Let's be real. They didn't just wake up and be there.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, if we go back 10, 12 years ago, they were struggling big time. Even more recent than that, they were struggling.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have the technology piece there. They were struggling to staff to the level to be able to basically support everyone that walked through the door, which in a box that big and the margins they run is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Their competition has the same problem, right? And or aren't far behind them from an innovation standpoint, but you know they're not the small box hardware store that has somebody that can answer every single question and walk around a small tiny store real quickly and take you to the aisle. So I think they've done a phenomenal job of understanding their customer base, understanding what their mix is of people like yourself versus me, right? How many people are going to leverage the technology, and they monitor that very closely, right? They monitor the usage, even with buy online and pick up. Now that was massively pushed faster because of COVID, but the reality is they were already headed down that path.
Yeah.
But they figured it out. And when they first started doing it, I would show up the next day and my stuff still wasn't picked sometimes. Now it's rare that it's not picked and I'm getting a text to say it's ready to pick up within an hour. And then they added the boxes on the outside of the stores. You can go and pick it up, and if it's small, at your own will, even more phenomenal. So they've monitored that very closely to understand how people are using the application, how many people are using it versus how many people, what their customer satisfaction is, to, what their mix is of usage. So they know how many people like yourself are walking in that are going to need help. And they even monitor what departments are being bought in. And then you can build the science behind that, right? To understand and build your staffing model to know this is what I need to do based on the volume. Then you add in seasonality, you add all these other elements in, and you can really get there. But I think it's understanding it's a journey and not just a plug it in and it works, that you have to continue to evolve it. And you have to be able to flex to the demand.
Yeah.
If you're in an area that all of a sudden is undergoing growth, guess what? Things are going to go up. All of a sudden it flattens out. And then who knows the next area of growth is, and you might start declining. You have to be looking out forward constantly.
I think about, as you say that, again, coming from Florida, right? We, in healthcare, we staff to snowbird season. And in retail, in the Florida space, particularly, again, using Home Depot as an example, I think of hurricane season. So you've got your holidays. Obviously staffing is notoriously challenging for retailers during the holidays, but then you have these unique niche cases, like you mentioned, where the Home Depots, the Lowe's of the world have to be planning for the people running out and buying plywood to board up their windows, or, mass buying bottled water, or the Targets and Publix having to prepare for everybody buying every loaf of bread in the store. So how can organizations best keep up with things like that? I think about, a smaller retailer. How do you stay on top of it when you've got the Targets and the Home Depots who are feeling like they've got the market cornered? It feels like one of those situations where it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that like the big box retailers are going to take over the world and push out the little guy.
Well, remember, not everyone likes to go to a big box.
That's for true.
And that goes back to a little bit of what's the experience you're trying to deliver. learn from the big boxes, learn from what they're doing. They've got the money to do the innovation. They've got the money to figure out how to model things. Learn from that, but you don't necessarily have to be that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, if you're a small bodega in a small area, which would be probably almost perfect here where we are right now, um, you look at their seasonality, you learn from it, you try to model it in a way that it is good for you. You're going to deliver a different customer experience. You're running a bodega versus a grocery store. You're going to probably talk to every single person that walks through the door.
Yep.
You're going to ask them how you can help them. You're going to sell them that, and you're probably going to sell them 2 or 3 things more at the same time. You got to be constantly selling up and selling with the customer and delivering, making them happy.
Yeah.
You want them coming back. Whereas in a big box store, it's a different experience. You kind of know they're probably going to come back unless you really tick them off, no matter what. So you got to learn from them, but be innovative on the experience you're trying to deliver. Make your place a unique place and people, this goes a little bit back to marketing and advertising, quite honestly. And one of the people I love is the early days of Apple. Apple didn't sell technology. They didn't sell a computer. They didn't sell an iPhone. What did they sell?
An experience.
Exactly. So you have to decide what that experience is you're selling on top of the product or whatever it is you're selling, whether it be a service too. But in retail, your product's only a piece of it. So decide what that experience is. Understand what it is you want the customer to walk out the door with and why you want them to come back. You can typically, if higher the experience is, the more engaged the customer will be. And quite honestly, usually the more they'll pay for something. You see it all the time that people are, pay higher for a Lexus than they do the same thing with a Toyota badge on it. Because of the fact of what it says and what the experience is. And yes, they are probably got a few more nice features on them. But the reality is they're buying that experience of that car because it has those nicer features, even though at the end of it, it's going to run and operate exactly the same.
Right.
But decide what that is and then build the staffing model around it. Now, that includes not only the customer-facing piece on it, too. Then you got to back into, okay, if I want a high experience and a good, for the customer to walk out happy, that means I got to have my shelves stocked. That means I got to have my replenishment plan solid. And that which drives a lot of other activities, right? If you're a big box, you can afford to be out of something every once in a while. They just assume it's going to be okay, right? Now they'll staff up for big events like hurricanes and things like that, and they've built warehouses just to handle that. They're prepared, and it's not their first time to the rodeo. But as a small consumer, you got to make sure that you're staying on top of all the other pieces and support those properly. It doesn't matter if you deliver the best experience in the world if you don't have product to sell them and you're constantly out of stock. They're not coming back.
Or at least having a mechanism to solve for that. So I think about, I'm a huge reader. If I could be reading a book right now instead of talking to you, it'd be a hard toss up. My local independent bookstore is, good size, nice 2-story bookstore, but it's no Amazon where any book on the planet that I want to read, I can have instantly available to me at my fingertips. So they've had to develop a model for if I come in and say, hey, I'm looking for this book and they don't have it, which they likely don't, it's a brick and mortar store, that they have the procurement process in place that they can say, okay, I can order it for you. It'll be here on this day at this time. This is when you can come pick it up. And the reason I mention that is because the experience I get when I walk in the door is why I'm willing to wait and then turn around and come back to get it when I could just go home and order it on Amazon and have it on my doorstep in an hour in some instances. Living in Orlando, I feel like we've got, the distribution centers all around us. So when we talk about that experience, I think about, and you mentioned it a little bit with hiring, the people. So it's the people who create those experiences. My local bookstore, when I walk in and they know me and they recognize me, it makes me want to come back versus the convenience of ordering online from Mr. Bezos and having my book shipped to me. So talk to me a little bit about how retailers really can kind of lean into that hiring process, particularly when, and there's the little wrinkle to it, retail is notoriously sometimes known for not having, let's say, a super developed career path. What can retailers be doing and thinking about when they know they need those types of employees who are gonna make me want to come into the store twice, get in my car and drive across town versus just ordering from my couch?
Again, I hate to say this. Well, there's two elements to this one. One, it starts with the experience you're trying to deliver to your consumer, um, because that says a lot about the type of people that you'll attract to want to work there, first off. But second is the culture.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
It's the culture you develop along with the enablement and support and empowerment and everything else that goes with that, to drive the type of hiring and the people you want.
Mhm.
Having worked for Adidas, and we actually, our corporate headquarters was in the US anyway, was across town from Nike. Okay. I used to make fun of
Interesting.
Nike because their teams used to get together every morning and do a cheer.
Mhm.
Okay. But talk about culture,
Yeah.
right? At Adidas, we had a culture.
Mhm.
If you go to some of the premier retailers, they have a culture.
Mhm.
People want to work there.
Yeah.
People have fun working there. The people understand what the vision is of the business and the retailer and what they're trying to do and who their customer is. So to me, if you don't understand that, your people are never going to understand it.
Mhm.
Now, at the same time, right, not to dish on the one out of Arkansas, but sometimes they just have to hire warm bodies based off the capacity they're doing and everything else. And you're going to have a degree of that.
Mhm.
But they still do a phenomenal job of motivating people. Most of their managers, store managers, district managers, regional managers, all of them started at the bottom.
Interesting.
They grow people.
Yeah.
It can be a career if you invest into it, and they've proven it over and over and over,
Mhm.
that they can grow and develop people and get them up, and they pay really, really well.
Yeah.
I mean, a simple store manager makes way more than we do. But they work, they have to grind it out.
Yeah.
Um, there's others that do that, but you have to understand, again, it goes back to what's the staffing model you want, what's the experience, how do you develop the culture, how do you attract people to that culture, and what are you willing to pay for it to deliver that model. So you got to go look at your cost analysis and say, okay, I want this model, but oh my gosh, I don't have the margins to do this. Then you probably got to make a decision.
Mhm.
Either raise your prices and know that your volume is going to go down, but you're delivering a better experience. You hire less. I mean, it's a bit of, it goes a little bit to the supply and demand, along with the experience, along with the pricing of the product. There's a fine tuning there, and you got to look at all of that. But attracting people can be very challenging. But where I say start is making yourself attractive.
Mhm.
If you're having to go out and grind to get resources to come in and work for you or apply for a position with you, people don't want to work there.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of it, right? Is you're going to have a hard time. You're going to have a hard, going to turn over. I hate to equate this, but my wife runs a preschool. You don't want to talk about churn and burn. I mean, nobody wants to pay what it. Everybody wants their kid to have an incredible experience.
Mhm.
Nobody wants to pay what it would actually cost to have an incredible experience,
Yeah.
because the resources, you got to pay them.
Yeah.
And, you're in an industry where $10, $15 an hour is what they're making.
Mhm.
You're going to get that experience.
Yeah.
And, it's tough. It's really tough. If you want to pay more as a consumer, guess what? You're going to get a better experience.
Yeah.
So understand that too. All the power doesn't necessarily rest in you. It also rests in the consumer and what they're willing to pay. So that ties back to the kind of people you can hire, the culture you can deliver, the experience you can deliver. So
I always love when our conversations turn to culture because, it's something that obviously you and I have a shared passion for. Would you say, this is just kind of totally your opinion from somebody who has worked in the industry. Do you think it's culture that keeps people in the retail space?
absolutely. Absolutely. For those who stay, I should
Right.
say, okay.
The long timer.
The long timers stay because of the culture and experience. And, that experience may even be just, I get to talk to 100 people a day.
Right.
I get to work with people who are delivering something great for that a customer likes, right? I'm giving them what they want. There's a point of satisfaction there.
Yeah.
When I was working the floor at Adidas, and, you have somebody come in that's looking for a particular shoe, they have a particular problem, and you're able to look at their walk and say, yeah, you pronate, let's go get you the right shoe. And they put it on and they're like, oh man, this is the best thing since sliced bread, right? And you're like, yeah, that's correct. That you get
There's fulfillment there.
yes, there's
Yeah.
absolute fulfillment off of it. And there's also the fulfillment of from the brand and the culture that they're representing.
Hmm.
So it was a badge of honor to say you worked at Adidas
Yeah.
or Nike. Um, I can't say that for other sports brands,
Right.
you know. But there's a lot of organizations out there that there's a badge of honor.
Hmm.
There's also you watch that badge get deteriorated sometimes.
Yeah.
There used to be a company called, well, I guess they're still around, Limited Brands, right? But at one point, they owned a ton of different retailers
Hmm.
and got into this mode where they were hot, and then they just put everything on sale when when the business started dying down. Instead of looking at what's causing the problems, they just started putting everything on sale, constantly.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, they're a discount store.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to buy there.
Hmm.
They tarnish their brand.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to work there. So you got to be careful too on how you react to the market and what's going on too, to make sure you don't shoot yourself in the foot or cause a problem that's going to deteriorate your brand and make things worse.
Hmm.
That's way outside the realm of workforce management, but it does impact it.
Right.
It absolutely impacts what you're doing with your staffing and what you're doing with your people and the kind of people you're going to be able to get and the culture you've developed.
Speaking of workforce management, since that's what we're here for with the podcast, kind of timely since we're just a few days out from new administration taking over. Obviously, every 4 years when we've got a new administration coming in, there's changes. There's just sort of updates to regulations. So, talk to me a little bit about how retailers can use, whether it's different tools or strategies or just kind of planning, to stay ahead of these evolving labor laws. It feels like every time I read an article, it's something's changing, or we can't do this, or we're doing away with these types of programs. How do retailers keep up, and how do they stay ahead of it to make sure they're not getting themselves in trouble?
Boy, is that a challenge. There are services you can subscribe to get all the labor law changes, right? I mean, if you're a large enough organization and you have a legal entity, they should be doing that. They should be subscribing to all of the local, state, and federal institutions that labor groups, and understand anything that's changing, coming out of there and constantly reflecting it. Also, you should be leveraging your vendor. If you have a workforce management vendor or HCM vendor or something like that, they should be staying on top of this stuff because they have to make sure their system allows you to be compliant.
Sure.
And you need to be monitoring what they're doing, understand what they're doing, monitoring their changes to the system. Most of them are SaaS solutions now, so those changes will come on a fly. You need to be looking at that. You need to be looking at the changes that are happening to make sure, okay, I see what they did. Why did they do that? Oh, that changed. I better go make sure it's working in our system.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually more volatile today than it's ever been. And to your point, every time administration changes down to the local level,
right,
things change.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked in not provinces, but like counties and communities, and that have their own labor rules.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in one time as a consultant where they had their own tax code where I was supposed to be paying local taxes. Even though I didn't live there, I was just working on a consultant.
Yeah.
Like, holy cow. Did I do it? No. Because it would, it wasn't enough to make it worth it. And I don't, they wouldn't have cared anyway, but they had that in place.
Mm-hmm.
So you really do have to stay in tune with your local entities. You got to push that down a little bit as far as you can to your local managers too, to try to stay on top of it and what they're hearing. There's a lot of avenues to do it, but just being aware and having a constant check on it's the biggest thing. And there are also retail organizations that you can get involved in.
Mm-hmm.
National Retail Federation Show does a great job of, especially at the federal level, they talk about things that are coming down the pipeline all the time. They're probably going crazy right now with all the administration things that are happening already in week one, right? There's a lot of changes there. People are already debating, is it good? Is it bad? We don't know.
Too soon to tell. We're 4 days out?
Yeah.
So.
I think the intent on a lot of things is really good, but we'll see what pays out.
Mm-hmm.
It really honestly depends on how people implement this stuff.
Right.
It boils down to what the implementation is and what the intent is. I think the intent's good, but me personally, I never trust a government to do anything properly. I don't care who the administration is. I'm a bit of a pessimist when it comes to that, but I'd rather trust good people and make good decisions.
Right.
So I think, stay on top of it. Make sure you're affiliated with the right organizations. Make sure you're affiliated with the legal entities to understand any type of labor changes coming. There are companies out there that'll you can subscribe to that'll roll all that up for you as well from a technology standpoint. With a previous company I was with one time, we actually did subscribe to that. So every time there is an update, I think theirs was like county and up, not down to the local municipality. But every time a change came through, we were alerted of it, and we could be proactive with reaching out to our customers that were in those locations to make sure that they were compliant. Um, and look, you have to weed through a lot of stuff too, because the mass majority of the stuff you're already doing.
Right.
A lot of the laws and rules are just catching up with where the industry's already gone. From a pace, like California is the leading one. If you can keep up with California, New York, and Massachusetts, you're probably way ahead of every other state municipality anyway. If you can keep up with San Francisco, you're ahead of most of the rules and everything else. Now, you may not want to apply all those rules to every locality because it may cost you too much. You got to evaluate that too, right? You do not have to enforce rules across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes those rules are of a decrement to your business, and you have to try to minimize them to where you have to as well. So be careful about that. Don't assume that just because this place did it, that everybody is going to do it. And you need to analyze the impact to it immediately to understand what it's going to do to you financially and to your customer experience and everything else that you're trying to deliver.
It's so interesting, the things you don't necessarily think about, but that are so critical. You mentioned your, workforce management solution or your HCM solution, kind of having these automatic updates, when things happen, which is so true. But I think about, in the years when I started using workforce management technology, when everything was on-prem and, our teams had to do the configuration and we had to, work through the updates. Now with it being in the cloud and so many things being a SaaS environment, we're in a situation where we now have to go validate that the vendors that we're utilizing did what needed to be done. So I imagine there's a little bit of we've made things easier for ourselves in one regard, but also it's just one more thing to think about that maybe before there was a plan for, because you had to have somebody who was there, fingers on the keyboard themselves, making those changes and updates. And now we're trusting that our technology vendors are doing this for us. I can imagine there's some potential for trouble there if you're not still staying on top of it and just blindly assuming that your SaaS vendor will take care of you.
Absolutely. That problem that you were dealing with as a retailer of keeping up with the laws, guess what? They're dealing with that too.
Yeah.
Okay. So sometimes when a law comes out of nowhere, they may not be ready for it. They may not have the change made. They may not have the configuration ability to do it and are going to have to all of a sudden go do something quickly. They will, right? Most of them will do that because they can't not be compliant because you'll be mad at them and along with other retailer. But reality is things change so fast. They may not be ready for it. They're going to try to figure out a workaround with you. They'll, solve a problem there, but you at the end of the day own it. You have to stay on top of it. Don't rely on them. What's the rule?
Trust but verify.
Yeah, exactly. Trust but verify. Make sure that it is doing for it, and make sure also that when those change, every time a release is done, you need to make sure those releases aren't automatically turned on, because sometimes that does happen too, depending on how you got things set and who your vendor is. That it doesn't change things, and all of a sudden schedules aren't coming out, pay's not right, and you're like, oh, what happened?
Oops.
So you need to stay on top of that too for that reason. But trust and verify. And here's the other crazy thing. Time after time after time when I've been doing implementations, the lawyer at this retailer interprets the law differently than this lawyer at this retailer, than this lawyer at this retailer, and so on. California, like in some of when lunch break rule came out years ago, everyone interpreted it differently. And it took several years before the government actually came out and restated the rule to get it clarified so that people could actually interpret it properly. I imagine lots of people lost lawsuits and won lawsuits because of the lack of clear interpretation of it. But there's a lot of rules like that aren't, you may interpret differently than the vendor did.
Right.
Which, hey, if your lawyer is going to stand behind it and your business is going to stand behind it, then you got to interpret the way you want to, implement it the way you want to, not necessarily. So that's, again, go back and trust and verify and make sure the interpretation is going the way you want it.
So I want to be mindful of time because you and I could sit and talk for 4 hours and not realize where the time's gone. And I don't think 4 hour long podcasts are, there's not a big market for it. So kind of wrapping us up from a perspective of, again, workforce management, which is what we're here to talk about at the end of the day. Where do you see workforce management evolving in the retail space over the next 5 years or
Lord.
so?
AI, right? And it's going to go there.
Yeah. We made it this far in the conversation not talking about AI. I'm actually shocked.
Me too. But I think there's so much that AI can do. Is there danger around it? Of course there is, right? Having come from the vendor side too for a little while, look, they're taking AI very serious. You got to keep it in the box. You got to make sure that it doesn't do things that you don't want it to do.
Mm-hmm.
You have to figure out how to keep it compliant on things it interprets. But the ability to be agile and flex and look at where things are going. I think the ability of AI and what it's going to do for your flexibility and scheduling and planning and things is going to be phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't know is the labor market and your resources and your team is going to allow you to leverage it to the maximum.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We already see that a lot of times there's this employee fairness aspect as well. I don't want to schedule somebody for 2 hours. Because that just doesn't, they drive an hour to get there, work 2 hours, drive home.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? They burn more gas money than they did actually make.
Terrible employee experience.
Terrible employee experience. So there's that balance of how far can AI flex us to, but at the same time, maintain, again, the culture, the experience, and everything else that you're trying to get to. But it's going to give you incredible insights. I think when you start looking at, especially on larger ones, when you start looking at the departmental performance or different areas of performance and where there's opportunity to tweak things or compliance, my gosh, how advanced it's going to be. I think it's going to, there's already tools out there to look at trends of, hey, I think this employee is at risk of leaving because these habits are happening. It's going to take it to the next level.
Right.
It's also going to help you to identify those who are doing exceptional that you may want to look at. That a lot of time your exceptional people kind of go unnoticed in a large retail environment because they're doing their job.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing it well. So they're out of sight, out of mind. This is going to help some of that to understand, okay, this person is doing phenomenal. I need to figure out how to leverage them more.
Yeah.
So I think, just the ability that it's going to provide insights and recommendations and guidance and everything else is going to be phenomenal. The other aspect, one last aspect on that AI is retail is evolving at a pace in the last 5, 6, 7 years that I've never seen it.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to be involved with a retailer who was one of the first ones of buy online, pick up at a different location type thing, going back quite a few years here. It was primarily aimed at college students.
Mm-hmm.
So you could go on, or you could even go in the store, pick out all the things you want, pay for it, and pick it up at a store next to your college dorm.
Yeah.
Or have it even potentially delivered to your college dorm. And this is going back over 10 years ago, almost 15 years ago, right? To where we are now is wow.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a distribution around the corner, you must live like in the middle of the mountains in Montana.
Yeah.
And nowadays, right? Which sometimes I wish I lived there. But, the reality is that things are just evolving and it's not going to stop.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to stop. The way the consumers are working nowadays on their demand, their expectation is just constantly and quickly evolving. AI will help you keep up.
Yeah. I think that's true for so many industries, but I absolutely can. Everything you're talking about from the compliance standpoint, I think about procurement and some of the things we talked about at the beginning to leverage that technology and data. It comes down to data and how you extrapolate it and how you analyze it and then how you put it into action within your organization. The people who are embracing it now for all that. Yes, it can be scary. Yes, it can be problematic. I saw iRobot. I know it can happen. But, those that aren't thinking about it are going to be left behind at the end of the day because already when we see the advances that have been made, folks that are kind of stuck in the dark ages a little bit around the technology, or who don't trust it, or don't want to go there. They'll be the next one shaking their head going, I could have been Jeff Bezos if only I'd leaned into it. So I had to get at least one more dig in there before we wrapped.
You did, and you did it well. But if I could have, I would have, should have, whatever, all that stuff, right? But you know what? We live, we learn. But don't, when you miss out on something like that, don't let it put you down. Keep innovating, keep looking forward, keep looking at how you can take advantage of the technology. Look at how you can, make sure that your retail organization stands out.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be different than everybody else, or you'll just be everybody else.
Keep looking for your next Amazon moment.
Yes.
It's a good.
I like it.
Yeah. I think we're going to end on that. I'll decide that's my mic drop moment, that we'll end the pod on. But thank you for giving us this insight. I mean, it's always, for as long as we've worked together and all the stories I've heard, it's always so interesting to hear about your background and just the different things you've seen and experienced to where you are now, so deeply, enmeshed in technology and consulting, knowing that, like you said, you started off walking around a floor, helping people with their instep, finding the right Adidas shoe. So it's really cool just to hear about how things have changed, but also how things are continuing to evolve so rapidly in this space. So yeah, thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah. So, thanks everybody again for tuning into our Workforce on Deck podcast. So as usual, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Leave us a comment. Please be sure to like and subscribe. My YouTube children told me I'm supposed to be mentioning that. And we're looking forward to talking to you again on the next one. So have a good one, Vince.
Thanks.